Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We are talking about the Billy Meier case this evening, and just to let you know, it looks like our guest hasn't shown up, so that's not a big problem where I'm concerned. I tend to roll pretty good on the Meier material. Edward Albert Meier is a one-armed farmer in Switzerland. He lives in a tiny mountain village called Hinterschmid-Ruti, which is about 52 minutes east of Zurich. It's in a beautiful forested area, and there on Billy's property is a building called the Semjase Silver Star Center, which is the world headquarters of a group called FIGU. And FIGU helps publish Billy's material. They help translate Billy's material. And there are various buildings in that area near the Semjase Silver Star Center. Over time, the environment of this center has been transformed into a small paradise of tranquility, peace, contemplation, and beauty. And the facilities focus on the learning and the teaching of what's called the creational laws and the commandments, the spiritual teachings. People come to the center from all over the world, and FIGU is really becoming a large organization. There is FIGU Switzerland, FIGU Germany, Australia, Japan, Canada, Italy, Australia, Sweden, the Czech Republic, France, Russia, and Spain. I don't think there's a FIGU USA right now. I think it was disbanded for one reason or another. But Billy, if you don't know who Billy Meier is, he's written over 40 books and probably over 1,000 smaller booklets that outline his contacts, describe his contacts, and actually are word-to-word documentation of his contacts with extraterrestrial humans. Most of his contacts come from a group that's called the Plejaren Federation. And there's a star system called the Plejaren star system, which is some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades. The Plejaren Federation is an organization of civilizations from star systems mostly within the Milky Way, but there are people from other galaxies as well. There are also people that are in different dimensions, different time-space configurations. All sentient races throughout the universe, they're referred to as human beings, even though some would be considered inhuman by their appearances. And during the 469th contact, Billy, back in August of 2008, Ptah listed some of the different kinds of human beings known in the universe, and maybe I'll throw that in the chat room. I want to say hello to Tobias and a couple guests, and glad you guys are joining me. These are some of the other humanoid life forms in the universe, according to Meier information. They say humanoids, the Plejaren themselves, all the Earth humans. I would say the vast majority are probably somewhat similar to us in appearance, maybe taller and shorter, different skin colors. But there's also a few others. There's the amphiboids, people who resemble animals that live in water. They live on land. And there's a person that was known as Asina, which I really haven't read much about. And according to the contact statistics, Asina is one of Billy's contacts from something called the Sinus star system. And so she was, I would imagine, an amphiboid. There's also reptilioids, human reptilian forms with a skin covered with scales, There's insectoids, human insect forms, their skins having a unusual quality, sauroids, human sauropod form, their skin resembling that of an elephant. And then they go on here with a list of all these different kinds of humanoid life forms in the universe. Again, I think the vast majority look somewhat like us Earth humans. Billy has started his contacts out with a man named Svoth back in 1945. Svoth was an extraterrestrial human of a place called Era. Now, Era is one of these planets that's in the Plejaren Federation. They're in a different time-space configuration than we are here on the Earth, a different dimension. It's a beautiful world. Era is a beautiful world. Very similar to the Earth. But the people that live there are about 50,000 years ahead of us in some senses. They haven't had any war for 50,000 years. I'll say that anyway. They have very advanced technology, but what's the most important thing is they have a higher awareness of what's called the creational natural laws and how the universe works. Billy, again, his first contacts go back to a man named Svoth, who was a Plejaren man of about 1,000 years old. He met with Billy, took Billy up in his ship. At this time, Billy lived in northern Switzerland in an area called Bulak. And when Billy was growing up in Bulak, Switzerland, he started to have sightings. And he saw a very large disk, a huge disk about 200 to 300 meters in diameter, which came and stopped near the 75-meter tall Reformed church steeple near his village there in Bulak. And Billy and his father saw this ship, and it disappeared shortly thereafter over to the west over what's called the Horrigan Forest in northern Switzerland in Bulak. And Billy, as he was growing up, would see the American bombers being shot down by the Swiss Air Force and sometimes also by the German Air Force. Now, Svoth told Billy that he would have a lot of suffering in his life, which he did. And sometimes his father would beat him because he would be gone on these trips with Svoth, and Billy would miss school. And during these beatings, sometimes Billy could neither sit or stand. Billy was punished very intensely by his father. And he was continuing to learn much from his contacts with Svoth. And like I said earlier, he spent a great deal of time skipping school. Svoth would bring this unusual silver pear-shaped craft, and it would land near Billy's home, and Billy would come out and go up in the ship with Svoth. And sometimes Svoth would put this device on Billy's head made of many different wires. And through this device, Billy got a wellspring of knowledge. And when he was sitting there with this device on his head, he would feel these unusual forces penetrating into him. And he suddenly knew events that would take place in the future. And Billy had a tremendous history. His spirit form is very ancient. And these extraterrestrials, they know about, they consider it a fact, reincarnation. And some of these extraterrestrials also have the ability to track spirit forms. And they knew about Edward Albert Meier's spirit forms, and they knew that he had been Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, Muhammad in his previous incarnations. And they've been watching the spirit form as it reincarnates as a teacher, and they also knew that it had incarnated on the earth in previous times, but it also incarnated on other worlds. And his spirit form had been the person that the player called Nocodamian in a past life, who had been narrator. So Spoth approached his job as Billy's mentor very humbly, and he knew that eventually Billy would have more knowledge than he did, even though Spoth was 1,000 years old at this time. Billy's second teacher was a woman named Asket from the Tao universe. Our universe is one of many universes. The Meier material says there are millions of universes. 46 trillion years ago, our universe was created in a Big Bang along with the Tao universe. Billy's second mentor named Asket came from the Tao universe and started to teach Billy. Billy at this time was probably about 15 or 16 years old, and she took Billy to Egypt, where Billy got to go far below the earth into these old cubicle constructions that were 73,000 years old. And Billy saw a group called the Giza Intelligences. The Giza Intelligences are also known as the B'Photh. And since ancient times, they tried to attain their supremacy over Earth humanity. In fact, in 1978, the B'Photh attacked the Semyase Silver Star Center, and the Pleiadians had to have and put up an invisible shield over the center. Eventually, these Giza Intelligences, they were captured, arrested, they were deported, they were stripped of all their technology except the most basic survival equipment, and they were incarcerated on a remote planet in the Pleiadian Federation. And we, unfortunately, here on the Earth will be affected by their telephotic impulses for another 200 to 300 years. Eventually, I think the B'Photh were all killed. They may have escaped that planet, I don't know, but I believe at some point here recently in a contact, Billy explained that they were killed. Now, these extraterrestrials had been on the Earth since ancient times, since the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria. I trace them back to Eris the 11th. Eris the 11th was one of the descendants of Eris the Barbarian. Eris the Barbarian was on the Earth during the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, and he was the one that got the Great War between Atlantis and Lemuria started. And eventually, after the war, the Earth was just nearly wiped out. So the people that weren't dead fled the Earth and went to other star systems. There was a core group here left on the Earth. And what happened over thousands and thousands of years, these people, they just degenerated. They lost their history. They were struggling to survive. People then would be born on the Earth again, even though the spirit form would reincarnate. It just became a cycle of degeneration on the Earth, probably for about, 700 years or so. It took centuries for the Earth to get over the destruction caused by the War of Atlantis and Lemuria. But eventually, this man came back, Eris the 11th, who had a son named Jehave, and then Jehave had a son named Jehovan, and Jehovan had a son named Erisame. And these extraterrestrials would live for centuries and centuries. Usually the son would kill the father. And they had a dictatorship over the people of the Earth. Erisame went underground into these cubicle constructions that I was just telling you about. And eventually he was pushed out of power by a man named Hen, who was also known as Jehovah. The Meier material said it was the same Jehovah that's talked about in our Old Testament. Jehovah was pushed out of power and murdered by his nephew Kamagal I. And during this time, for thousands of years, Earth humans would get religious miracles and visions of every kind from these Giza intelligences. And this religious delusion would continue. And sometimes the Giza intelligence would appear as angels as God and gods as they had done in earlier time, and they encouraged Earth people to worship them. They also would have used brutal violence to gain control over the people of the Earth if they needed to. Again, as I was about to say, one of these rulers, Kamagal I, forced all the terrestrial religions into these blood-demanding cults, unfortunately, and were able to maintain this power on the earth for a long time. Kamagal I was eventually replaced by Kamagal II, who was here until the 1970s, I have heard. One of the things I wanted to bring up this evening in relationship to the Giza intelligences was Adolf Hitler, and I've talked about this before, and I'm starting to develop it a little bit more. Adolf Hitler was influenced by the Giza intelligences through a man named Hermann Steinschneider. Now, Hermann Steinschneider lived from about 1889 to about 1933. He was actually murdered in Berlin, and there's an interesting story behind that. But he was born Hermann Steinschneider, but he was known as Erich John Hannessen, and he was an Austrian Jewish publicist, clairvoyant performer. He was a bit of a charlatan, actually. He was acclaimed for being able to hypnotize people. He was an occultist, astrologer. He was very active in the Weimar Republic in Germany. Also, at the beginning of Nazi Germany, he's said to have instructed Adolf Hitler in performance and in achieving a dramatic effect. And when I read this, I realized, I wonder if some of the theatrics that Hitler had during his performances were actually because of the influence of Steinschneider. One of the things that the Steinschneider did was predict the Reichstag fire. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it was one of the things I guess they blamed on the Jews. The Nazis did. Anyway, I think Steinschneider was murdered because he got a little too close to Hitler for some people's comfort. There was some jealousy there. I guess being close to the Fuhrer was as a desired position. Anyway, how does this relate to the Billy Meier case? Well, the Plejarians say that Adolf Hitler was in many respects a genius, and his knowledge ranged from areas of art and technology, sciences. One of the things Hitler could do was use the power of suggestion. He was, in some ways, a man of intellect and reason. He was destined to lead the earth in a positive way. However, the Giza intelligence succeeded in taking possession of Adolf Hitler's being and misusing him for their dark and malicious purposes. And in Contact 260, line 110, it describes what happened with Steinschneider. Let me read this. It says, the reason for his wrongly chosen path developed quite early, talking about Hitler here, when he secretly came in contact with the Thule Society of that time. The Thule Society was a secret society in Germany, in consequence of which he also came into contact with Hermann Steinschneider. Steinschneider, again, belonged to the Thule Society. Anyway, the efforts of the leaders at that time of the Thule Society, they wanted to dominate the world. The Thule Society did, and they used Steinschneider to influence and shape Hitler in that direction, and in accordance with their will. And they eventually, this Thule Society triggered World War II. Now, Steinschneider became more powerful over the course of time with his respect to domination of Adolf Hitler. What happened was the Plejaren at one time gave Adolf Hitler in his youth these telepathic impulses, and they were kind of trying to guide him in a positive way. But when Steinschneider became involved, it became more and more difficult for the Plejaren to give these impulses to Adolf, and Adolf Hitler became delusional and had a tremendous lust for power after this. And this is what sent Hitler down the wrong path. However, even though Hitler went down the wrong path, he has been, I would say, inaccurately portrayed in history. And one of the things I want to talk briefly about this evening is something another researcher has said about Hitler that I recently learned. This researcher is a guy named Benton L. Bradbury, who gives us a new perspective on Germany and on Adolf Hitler. The official story regarding World War II in Germany is that Germany and Adolf Hitler were great villains. And one of the things that Hitler did was to attack Poland. However, people don't really understand all the details associated with why Hitler attacked Poland. Historically, there were two parts to the German Empire. After World War I, at the Treaty of Versailles, they kind of separated Germany, I guess, into these two parts. And there was a city called Danzig that was between these two parts of the German Empire. And the people that lived in Danzig considered themselves German, and they wanted to be part of Germany. However, at that time, they were part of Poland. This was after the First World War, and the people of Danzig deeply resented being separated from Germany. So what happened is when Hitler, one of the reasons Hitler attacked Poland was so that the people of Danzig could become part of Germany again. So there's a lot in terms of our history that really have kind of been hidden and kept from us. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about history on this show a fair amount, because we can't get a clear perspective of where we are today without, focusing on history and what really happened in history. Speaking of which, in 1995, the Plejaren left the Earth. Before that, there were groups of extraterrestrial humans that lived on the Earth. One of the groups I've talked about before were the Hasters. The Hasters were brought here by the Plejaren. They were from a galaxy that was hundreds of light years away from our Earth. So in any case, the Hasters had a base that was created by the Plejaren. It was in the North Sea, and they were only about 1,100 years ahead of us in their development. So they were much more compatible with our thought forms. The Plejaren were here up until 1995. I think the Hasters left in 1995. There was another group that lived in Mount Shasta called the Hyperboreans that were here until about 1995. But something happened during that time that caused all these extraterrestrial groups to leave. I still don't know what that's all about. So the only extraterrestrials that are residing on the Earth, I guess there are none residing on the Earth, but there are some that still visit here. But I think it's a much smaller group. I mean, at one time we had bases in Asia, North America, Switzerland. There was a base in Switzerland that had been here for 300 years. There were 2,862 extraterrestrial humans on the Earth. but not so anymore. The number of humans on the earth has decreased very much. One of the things that's so important about the Meier material is the information that's related to what are called the creational natural laws. And I talk about the creational natural laws fairly consistently. There's a book called The Way to Live, which I encourage that you try to get. It's one of the recent translations into English, and it talks about this creational natural law called the law of striving. And the law of striving is very important in terms of your happiness. One of the things I like to do is talk about, I want to say hello to some of the folks on the chat room real quick. Gemini Moon, Modern Day Seer, Tobias Davison, Guest 588, and Guest 619. I like to talk about practical things that you can use to make your life better. And that's one of the great values of the Meier material, is it has so much practical information to make your life better. One of the things that I suggest that everyone focuses on is striving in their life. What is striving? Striving is working to make yourself better. Also working at your job. It's very important that you really focus on your work in your various areas. You know what your work is. I don't know what your work is. And I think through time, as you strive more, you will find out what your purpose and what your work is here. Let me read a little something about striving. Consequently, it is therefore striving for that which is higher and more absolutely fully developed. And therefore, life does not mean suffering or grief, rather fulfillment through striving. But therefore, also death does not mean suffering and grief. Rather, it means a change in the becoming and the passing of the endless rebirth to the new powerful striving and therefore to evolving. Death, in turn, means new life. And death means striving, advancement, and higher development. Evolution in following the creational principle of development. So let's talk about, I don't want to lose the concept of striving, but striving continues after death. So when you die, your spirit form comes out of your body, your consciousness comes out of your body, and it moves into an area that's called the other world, the spirit realm. The consciousness goes into an area called the overall consciousness block, and all your past life experiences are processed, and they're turned into what's called essences. These essences include peace and love and virtue, and everything that you learned that was of value are stored in these essences. And these essences are put in a neutral positive form, and they're kind of absorbed by your spirit form. And you should be in the spirit realm about 1.5 times whatever your life was. So if you lived 100 years, you should be in the spirit realm for about 150 years as your spirit form processes your memories from your past life, your experiences, what was important, what you learned. All of this gets processed. This is what goes on in the spirit realm, and it strengthens your spirit form, and it prepares it for the next life. Now, when the spirit form comes back, if it has not had enough time to process the previous life experiences, it is not prepared for the new life. And that's what's happening right now on the earth, because we have such an overpopulation that spirit forms are pulled out of the spiritual realm too soon. So, and this causes a problem in terms of maleness. You don't see men being as, real men anymore because their spirit form is yanked out too early. It also causes overdependence on parents. So the overpopulation problem is more than a physical problem. It's a spiritual problem too. So I wanted to bring that up again. I think it's important that we understand that. So the striving that occurs on the death side is the spirit form strives to absorb all of the goodness that you learned in your material consciousness during your previous life. So this prepares you for the new life. You see, creation, unfortunately, is not perfect. And this is very important to understand because creation is not perfect. There are problems in the universe. Have you noticed? I've noticed. And one of the big problems is overpopulation. And we have spirit forms coming in too soon. They're not prepared. We also have us Earth humans are the highest intelligence on this planet. And we are far from being as intelligent as we need to be. This is also one of the problems of creation. So you see, it's not a perfect system. Have you noticed how many animals die unnecessarily, how many humans die unnecessarily? I call the Earth the planet of unnecessary death. And part of that is due to the fact that the Earth humans don't understand the creation. They don't understand the importance of life, and they don't understand these creational natural laws like striving. Let me continue in the book here. Every single rational individual is born in order to evolve, compelled and driven by creational impulse of striving for that which is higher. So this universal intelligence is impulsing you to strive for that which is higher, that which is more rational and more absolutely fully developed. And every single rational individual is integrated into the laws of reincarnation, the laws of rebirth. You're going to reincarnate whether you want to or not. And you're going to reincarnate on this earth whether you want to or not, unless you die, unless you're on a ship and you're taken to another world and you die on that world, then you're going to reincarnate on that world. So there are many lives to evolve and many lives that need to strive. And one day, after 40 to 60 million years, the level of evolution, a certain level of evolution is reached through constant striving for that which is higher, for that which is more absolutely developed, in which the physical body changes and slowly becomes a pure fine matter form, which slowly, over many more millions of years, changes into a pure spirit form. So there are 7 evolutionary steps. The first step is primitive. The second step is rational life. We here on the earth are in rational life, although we're not always rational. In rational life, we have religions, we have veneration of powers we don't understand. But as we move into stage 3, those religions start to weaken. We start to understand the universe a little better. We start getting space travel. Some of us are just entering into stage 3. Stage 4 is very interesting. In stage 4, human societies completely lose their religions. They start to understand the creational natural laws. One of those creational natural laws they understand is related to genetics, and they become genetic engineers. Semyase's ship had an intelligence which the Plejaren created a organic intelligence, a biological intelligence which Semyase could have telepathic contact with. And you could think of Semyase's ship as a living being, which is amazing. A sentient living being. Stage 5, that's the last stage where humanity has a physical body, and people become Ishwish at this stage. They have the age of recognitions where they can recall their past lives. They can do incredible things with their material consciousness, telekinesis, teleportation, telepathy, all sorts of amazing things. And then we go into this 6th stage, which is this pure fine matter form, which I just told you about. Let me continue here in the book, The Way to Live, on page 120. However, if wrong philosophies, religion, sectarianism, and wrong worldviews could ensure the wrong immortality dogma and the dogma of death, thus, for example, through the truth of the continued existence of the life by means of the death and strive for new life, then all lively enthusiasm. In other words, if we really understood reincarnation, if we understood the law of striving, if we understood how the universe works, we would no longer have enthusiasm for gods, saints, masters, gurus, and sublime ones. And we wouldn't be fooled by swindlers and deceivers and sick ones. We wouldn't be fooled by channelers, mediums, the false contactees, etc., etc. I wanted to, if I can, real quickly, talk a little bit more about striving. I think this is one of the most important things that we can learn. Let me continue here. If only one were to free the human being from his or her anxieties, then suffering would also become less and would become more bearable. And were one just to free the human being from the anxiety about death, and that's one thing that I want to do, is help free you about the anxiety about death. And I may have just gotten a message from our guest. Yes, I did. I got a message. I'm going to tell her to call in, Debbie, if you can, and hopefully we'll get our guest to call in. Sorry for that confusion. Here we go. Oh, this is what I wanted to get to. He/she thereby loses the anxiety and recognizes the sense of this, that all life is directed at striving from the tiniest atomic building block right up to the creation itself, which constitutes no kind of exception. So all philosophies, religions, and sects and so forth will become suddenly recognized as a means for the purpose of the consciousness-based enslavement of the human being. And that's what it says in the Meier material, that the religions are the consciousness-based enslavements for human beings. Send a quick message to our potential guest. She still hasn't called in yet, so I don't know what's going on there. I tell you, that's one strange thing. And while I just jumped off the topic of the Meier material. I do have Dr. Jim Fetzer on Wednesday, August 10th, and he's going to talk about a lot of things. Particularly, he's going to talk a little bit about World War II, hopefully. Since I kind of got off on the Adolf Hitler thing, I thought that would be an interesting guest to have, because he's very knowledgeable in this sort of thing as well. So anyway, Edward Albert Meier, he's a one-armed farmer from Switzerland. He has had incredible experiences, and probably the most important information, or the information that I continue to focus on the most, is information about love, and that the love of creation is everywhere, because without it, nothing at all would be able to exist. The individual should therefore be aware that he exists only through the love of creation, and that he carries this love within himself. All of nature in its indescribable splendor is nothing but the love of creation, which is expressed visibly. And I think I might have a caller. Is this, by chance, Debbie?
Hi,
Hello,
Mark.
caller?
It's Debbie West.
Thank you for calling in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm doing very good, and I'm glad you joined us. We've had quite a conversation here the past 40 minutes. I've been talking about something called the Giza Intelligences. I talked about Billy's early life. I've been quoting from one of his books called The Way to Live, Die Art zu Leben in the German, and we've been having an interesting Billy Meier discussion, and now I get to share some of this with you. You've recently kind of gotten an interest in the Meier information?
A little bit. I mean, I've done a show for 3 years on kind of the breaking news in the space industry, and then correlating with that the information about our cosmology and the evolution on the planet, our ascension, the Earth's transmutation, and the new species that's being developed. And I when I stumbled into Michael Horn, I think he might have contacted me, and he had a lot of the same information coming out of the Meier story. I got very intrigued because I was talking more to some of the, I don't know if they call themselves Palladian ambassadors on Earth, and they're Earth humans. They're incarnated in Earth bodies, but they are on the ground, boots on the ground, doing teaching. And a lot of the teachings that they do is very similar to what I'm hearing come out of some of the Meier case. So that's where I find it very interesting.
Well, one of the things you asked me, you had just sent me a little text message, and I think you asked something about why is Billy being contacted?
Yeah, right. I mean, why him? Mm-hmm.
Can I try to answer that question for you?
Absolutely.
Well, it's. Let me back up a little bit. One of the things the Meier material talks about is reincarnation, and it says that we all have a spirit form, and our spirit form is our spiritual consciousness, and it's located in an area of our middle brain called the superior colliculus. And these extraterrestrials, they know much more about reincarnation than we do. And I believe they have some technology which allows them to identify spirit forms. And they have tracked this spirit form here on the earth as it's, and I'm talking about the spirit form that's currently residing in Edward Albert Meier. The Plejaren know in ancient times on other worlds he lived lives as a teacher called Nocodamian, which was their spiritual teacher. So when they saw and they understood that this spirit form was incarnating on the earth, and the Meier material says it is incarnated as Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. And the Plejaren say, the Meier material says, that in each one of these lifetimes, the same spirit form taught this ancient universal teaching. And it's kind of gotten distorted over time, and it's morphed into the religions that we have. Now, the reason these extraterrestrials are in contact with Billy is because they know that in this lifetime, he is going to write this spiritual teaching down in written form, and it will be stored so that the people of the earth will be able to use it in the future during this coming 800-year period that's called the third millennium, and this time of confusion and maliciousness that's slowly spreading all over the earth. And after a certain amount of time passes, more and more people will come to understand this material, and eventually we'll enter into a time of peace and blessing. So that was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, I guess. Did that make any sense?
No, it does. And I had kind of gotten into that bit of his spiritual history and his different incarnations. I mean, we all bring different pieces of, ancestry type spirit into this, especially now, I think, during this important time. There's so many blessed spirits here, and we all have unique missions. So his mission is very important, but I'm just saying that from what I've witnessed, I mean, there's many cosmic connections from not just places like the Pleiades, but, all kinds of places that are coming here to Earth during the transmutation. And all the energies are telling us that we have to live as a peaceful, sovereign nation, and that there are lots of tools that are being brought here during this time that will help us towards that process and towards ascension. So I applaud what he's been able to provide for humanity, and for all the others that are providing similar messages. So I'm not trying to diminish anything he's done, but like I said, I have heard from Arcturus, I've heard from the Adronoman Council, I've heard from so many of the seeded the planets who have seeded Earth back in the the beginning, that all they want is for the Earthlings to wake up. I mean, just like Billy Meier's teachings have shown us, all they want is for us to wake up and to understand our cosmic heritage and to start to evolve as a species. To start to understand the basic principles that is well understood out in the universe in the higher dimensions, because they've been there. They've been through this evolutionary process. They've been through this challenge that we're facing, and that's why they can bring us the information, because they've seen it happen. It's not something unique or original. It's something that happens on all evolving planets. So certainly I mean, the help that we're getting is tremendous. I just wish that we would understand that the contact is real, and that what Billy Meier is been able to share and to provide is not something to ridicule or diminish. Or it frustrates me, and I'm sure it frustrates a lot of people that listen to your show, that we're not digging into this and doing a little bit more with it. I mean, why are we?
Yeah.
Why are we letting a government, dictate to us what our reality is? What's the truth out there? When we know at the soul level, we know this is all really happening. This is more real than anything that we've ever experienced as incarnated beings.
I find it kind of almost humorous when people talk about disclosure from the government. What are your thoughts on that?
It is a little bit humorous. I mean, the fact that since 1940 we have been able to live in a 70-year period where we've brought in zero technology to the public and zero information that could help us towards the biggest event that we've ever experienced on this planet, it's a little bit frustrating because all the information's out there. I'm sure you have. I mean, we've seen the information, right? We've heard the information on how to evolve and how to provide this advanced medical protocol, how to provide this advanced science. This, the Galactics have told us over and over, all we need is for you to ask us with an open heart and good intention for our assistance, and we will be there. I know that the Plejarans would love to help the Earth government, especially the U.S. government, but they're too ignorant, to accept the help, and we could use it as we face, what we're about to go through.
It's hard to believe it's been 71 years since World War II. That's hard for me to even wrap my mind around.
Well, I laugh because, I mean, it's not funny, but we've been spending the last 20 years in World War III. Yeah,
I mean, that's a good question. Have we already started? Have we already started World War III? I feel some encouragement when I look back in history, and I think about in 1945 we stopped World War II, but in 1950 we started the Korean War, and it seems to me, well, and maybe I'm just being overly optimistic here, that maybe, I mean, I know there's warfare going on now, but it's not like on the scale of World War II, and it's not on the scale of the Korean War or the Vietnam War. Well, we did have this little thing in the Gulf War, but that just lasted days. I mean, granted, we killed a lot of people in days and destroyed a lot of material in days. So maybe I'm just, a little bit optimistic. What do you think? Am I crazy or what?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. We've got weapons up in space pointed at ourselves.
Yeah.
We're just a very barbaric species. I mean, we are heading down two different timelines here, and I think that the time is a little bit past when we should have been listening. I mean, we should have been listening to the Meier case back when it first came out. We need to listen. We need to listen. Yeah, I mean, the material is there. It's I think it's accurate. I mean, I have very valid sources from the Pleiades, and they say this is all very accurate. There's nothing missing here. This is genuine attempt to reach us. They've tried everything. They've tried crop circles. They've tried direct contact. They've come incarnated in human bodies. I mean, we have an army of light from all over the universe here on the planet Earth trying to help during the ascension, is the way I've seen it. And the councils and federations are kind of perplexed at the inability for us as individuals, as humans, to move our government towards that energy of love and that energy of unity and that energy of being a peaceful sovereign nation entering into a cosmic community. Earth itself has to become a part of a larger, a larger universe of sentient life, because we've been shut off for so long. And I think that part of it is just bringing out truth and transparency. And that's been the biggest frustration for me as I come from news reporting, so it's like, oh my gosh, how can we be quibbling about this any longer?
What kind of news reporting did you do?
Well, I used to do reporting like on the Hubble, the Mars rover, when the Curiosity was landing on Mars. Out of NASA. I still go to some NASA press conferences and Boeing press conferences and, keep up with what's happening in the space industry. But there seems to be a really strong disconnect between what's happening in the commercialization of the space industry, which is a lot, and the public's perception of what really is happening in the universe. So,
and who were you?
We have to bring those two things together.
Who were you working for when you were a reporter at that time?
So I worked for manufacturers that wanted publicity. Mm-hmm.
Really? Interesting.
So like BAE, for instance, BAE Systems is a big government agency, and they had at the time a lot of interactions with NASA and with, they manufactured a lot of unmanned systems at the time. I mean, and people that had components on the Curiosity rover would be writing trade articles about, hey, we landed, our components are working. It's always, it's the Hubble. The Hubble is the biggest success story of international cooperation that we've ever seen, between that and the International Space Station. I mean, just the kind of scientific and geopolitical collaboration that went into those projects. And that's the kind of thing that we need. When I interviewed the commander of the ISS. He's up there now. He went up there in March. And Jeff Williams, and what he said to me in the interview was, we need to take the geopolitical example that is shown by the space station, assembling it in space, and the number of countries represented, and the scientific discoveries that are being made, and we need to take that into our current government and political system, because we can get along, we can work together, we can share ideas and energy and enthusiasm for this planet as Earthlings, as a one group, a unified group. And so I think that the scientists get it. I think the scientists are open-minded and get it. And I think the general public is ready for it. I think that we're being blocked. We're being blocked by some force that keeps it from penetrating. But I think that the Meier case, for one, I mean, it's open contact right now that we're experiencing with a group of very benevolent beings that just want to help. They don't have any other, they obviously don't have another objective. So I was happy to hear Michael say that some of the NASA folks have come forward, some of the scientists have come forward and offered their, validation publicly for the for what's been researched, and then maybe that'll help sort of draw in more authenticity to his claim, so that we can, like I said, so that we can be more broad-minded about the fact that we're just not the only ones out there. We've got sentient life all over this universe. So,
Debbie, we're running low on time. I wanted you to get the chance to tell people about your show. You've got a show on Revolution Radio, correct?
I do. It's called Lost Knowledge. We interview a lot of people that are talking very openly about the evolution in consciousness, similar to what you talk about, and the transmutation of our species, and archaeology findings that prove that we are not the first and the most advanced civilization on Earth, and also sharing in the joy of what we can experience as cosmic citizens. So Lost Knowledge is on Saturdays now at 2 Eastern Time. And we have fun. We have good guests, like you do. I mean, we talk about a lot of the new topics about, in an open fashion about what's happening here on Earth.
And you have a couple of websites?
I do. I mean, if you search Lost Knowledge, you'll see. I've written between the mainstream articles and then articles in UFO Digest and some of the Exoconsciousness Waking Times and some Exoconsciousness sites. I mean, there's some articles scattered around that I put out, but I put them all out under Lost Knowledge so that they're easily found. And that's kind of where I just I publish under Lost Knowledge. That's my for the radio show, and then we're working on maybe doing a TV show too under that same name. So.
Oh, is that right?
Like I said, I'm so, I've talked to so many people for so long that it's just, I cannot believe that we can't all come together and overrule what's blocking us. And I think it's an energetic thing. I think it's an intention. I think we just all need to wish to put ourselves in that state of mind that we are part of an incredible multidimensional universe, that we ourselves are a multidimensional species. And we're having an expanded experience here during the transmutation and the ascension of the planet Earth. So we need to just, do everything possible to make that the most enjoyable and most amazing experience for all of us.
Well, Debbie, I appreciate you coming on, and it's been pleasurable to talk with you. We're pretty much out of time. Did you want to make any last closing statements?
I'd like to just say that to the Plajarans, thank you. I mean, I'd like to say to Billy Meier, thank you. I mean, I think that the people that are brave enough and courageous enough to, and to you too, Mark, for the people that are brave enough to stay in this for as long as you have, and to be continuously, putting this information out there and putting yourself out there on the line to do it. I'm just proud of everybody that's doing that, and thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you, Debbie. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again. Thanks for coming on the show. It was great chatting with you. Have a great evening.
Awesome. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.